Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our service this morning from the UU Meeting House in Springfield, Vermont. We're really glad that you're here, no matter where here is, whether it's in the sanctuary or you're zooming in from near and far. My name's Pam, and I'm one of the trustees, and I'd just like to welcome you and just say thank you so much for spending some of your Sunday with us. Bye for now.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, there you are, but you're up there. Good morning, Zoom. We light this chalice this morning. We light this chalice this morning alongside chalices lit across the globe. We light this chalice for liberation of the war-torn and utterly exhausted. For every being longing to be free, for every act of courage in the face of tyranny, for the grace of snow. We light this chalice this morning in prayer for peace. The great poet Rumi wrote a beautiful short piece that Unitarian Universalists have been singing the last 100 years or so, well, maybe 50 years or so. I think you know it. Will you join me in starting our service with come, come, whoever you are. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of believing, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. One more. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of believing, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. What a congregation. Thank you. Our opening song, and there will be slides up on the wall for those here in person and on Zoom, looking at the hillside. Look at the hillside.
Look at the hillside, look at the mountain, look at a sky snowy and cold. Look at the pine trees, look at the hemlocks, look at the fir trees, look and behold. Think of the summer, think of the autumn, think of the springtime soon to be here. But this is winter, long nights and short days, time to tell stories, to bring us cheer. is special, each branch is lovely, each season needed, each has a goal. So are you special, so are you lovely, so are you needed, heart of the Lord.
Okay. So the program says story for all ages, but in fact, it's going to be a poem for all ages. And I'm going to read it a second time. This is impossible. Failure is impossible. Who said that, folks? Failure is impossible. Susan B. Anthony, I believe, was the first person that said it. King may well have. So this is Anne Sexton's poem, Courage. Courage. It is in the small things we see it. The child's first step, as awesome as an earthquake. The first time you rode a bike, wallowing up the sidewalk. This first spanking when your heart went on a journey all alone. When they called you crybaby or poor or fatty or crazy and made you an alien, you drank their acid and concealed it. Later, if you faced the death of bombs and bullets, you did not do it with a banner. You did it with only a hat to cover your heart. You did not fondle the weakness inside you, though it was there. Your courage was a small coal that you kept swallowing. If your buddy saved you and died himself in so doing, then his courage was not courage. It was love. Love as simple as shaving soap. Later, if you have endured a great despair, then you did it alone, getting a transfusion from the fire, picking the scabs off your heart, then wringing it out like a sock. Next, my kinsman, you powdered your sorrow. You gave it a back rub, and then you covered it with a blanket, and after it had slept a while, it woke to the wings of the roses and was transformed. Later, when you faced old age and its natural conclusion, your courage will still be shown in the little ways. Each spring will be a sword you'll sharpen. Those you love will live in a fever of love, and you'll bargain with the calendar. And at the last moment, when death comes, opens the back door, you'll put on your carpet slippers and stride out. Before we sing hymn number 28, View the Starry Realm, which will be on the slides, I want to give a little preface. It was written by Norbert Capek, one of the martyrs of the Unitarian history. He was a Protestant. He grew up in Czechoslovakia, which was then the Austro-Hungarian Empire, thank you. And after World War I, when Czechoslovakia became its own country, he'd come over to the United States, was a minister in New Jersey. He sent his children out, though, but anyway, he discovered Unitarianism. He goes back to Czechoslovakia, gets money from the UUA. This is 1921, and founds a church in Prague, a Unitarian church, 2,800 people in attendance. He's a fabulous preacher. The Nazis, of course, come into Czechoslovakia at the beginning of the war, and He's arrested for listening to the BBC. It was against the law to listen to the radio of the Brits. He and his daughter were arrested. The court found him guilty, worthy of just 1 year. He'd already been in prison for 12 months or 11 months, so he stayed 1 more month. He was supposed to go out, but the Gestapo sent him instead to Dachau. He was there about a year before they killed him. While he was there, those who survive report that he wrote some 100+ hymns and was always ministering to everyone. And without him, the survivors said that none of them would have survived. This is only 10 of those many, many hymns he wrote have survived, smuggled out, no doubt, by the by the survivors. And this is one of those hymns. And thanks to Julaine that we have it this morning. Thank you, Julaine, for that.
And the choir.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, of course, and the choir.
What a powerful song, and to hear the history that it was written in Dachau. So we are here as part of a beloved community. And we recite our affirmation together every Sunday to say why we are here. I invite you to say the words with me. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve the needs of all beings, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with the source of our being. And another way that we show our support for one another is our offering, where we collect money for the ongoing work of this church and food for the family center.
Denise Levertov, one of the great spiritual poets in the English language. Some of you on Zoom will remember it from last week. It bears repeating. It's entitled Variation on a Theme by Rilke, and it's bouncing off of or inspired by the Book of Hours, Book 1, Poem 1, Stanza 1. A certain day became a presence to me. There it was, confronting me. A sky, air, light, a being. And before it started to descend from the height of noon, it leaned over and struck my shoulder as if with the flat of a sword, granting me honor and a task. The day's blow rang out metallic. For it was I, a bell awakened. And what I heard was my whole self saying and singing what it knew. I can. And I'm going to reread Anne Sexton's poem, Courage. It is in the small things we see it, the child's first step, and as awesome as an earthquake. The first time you rode a bike, wallowing up the sidewalk. The first spanking when your heart went on a journey all alone. When they called you crybaby, or poor, or fatty, or crazy, and made you into an alien. You drank your acid and concealed it. Later, if you faced the death of bombs and bullets, you did not do it with a banner. You did it with only a hat to cover your heart. You did not fondle the weakness inside you, though it was there. Your courage was a small coal that you kept swallowing. If your buddy saved you and died himself in so doing, then his courage was not courage, it was love. Love as simple as shaving soap. Later, if you have endured a great despair, then you did it alone, getting a transfusion from the fire, picking the scabs off your heart, then wringing it out like a sock. Next, my kinsman, you powdered your sorrow. You gave it a back rub, and then you covered it with a blanket, and after it had slept a while, it woke to the wings of roses and was transformed. Later, when you face old age and its natural conclusion, your courage will still be shown in the little ways. Each spring will be a sword you'll sharpen. Those you love will live in a fever of love, and you'll bargain with the calendar. And at the last moment, when death opens the back door, you'll put on your carpet slippers and stride out. And now we have an anthem from the choir, Be the Light.
There is always a light when we are ready to see it. There is always a light when we are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill. Together we will. There is always a light in the dark when we are ready to see it. There is always a light in the dark when we are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, and be to climb this hill. Together we will.
There is always
light. There is always light. We are ready to see it.
There is always
light. There is always light. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, and be the light. Together we will.
There is always light. There is always light.
We are ready to see it.
There is always
light.
There is always
We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, and be to climb this hill. Together we will.
There is always light. There is always There is always There is always
Be the light.
You are amazing, choir. I want to thank everybody who made this morning possible. And is this a new painting? Is this?
No, we've had it for many, many years, but it's been in the closet.
Yes, I thought it did just come out of the closet. Who is the painter?
It says on there on the left.
Brunel?
Yeah.
Anyone here?
Jerry Brunel.
Jerry
so
Brunel.
She's not here.
Okay. Okay, well, it's just lovely. I'm really enjoying it. I want to say a special thank you to June. We've been working together on various things. She's helping Chester Zoom, and very grateful. Speaking of Chester, they have accepted your kind invitation to come here for Easter service. And I will be officiating, presiding, speaking. Anyway, very excited, and please bring friends and relations. Start planning now. The way the churches grow is you invite people to come. You have to invite them 7 times before they'll say yes. So keep at it. And I'm telling you early on, I'd love to see a full sanctuary on Easter. A lot of Unitarians don't believe in Easter. They can't imagine what I would talk about. It's one of my favorite times to preach. So, Larry, is it? Larry? Yeah. Approached me before the service and said that he was glad I was speaking about courage. It was the most important topic given what's going on today. And Julaine had mentioned the possibility of a discussion after the sermon. I don't like having this talk back in the service itself. I like the worship service to be as a whole, but Sharon, I should have talked to you this before, but after the service is over, I'm happy to stay put and have a 5-10 minute discussion, let other people talk, if that's all right. Is that all right with all the Zoom people? Yes? Okay. Okay.
Nancy, maybe we could just say the date of Easter.
Easter,
April 9th.
April 9th. Yes, thank you. And I have a meditation and I forgot to make sure it was in the program. It's not in the program. So if you would, we can go ahead with just a short meditation followed by just a short silence. Snow-covered earth, spirit of hibernation and renewal, spirit of humility and courage, be present to us as we sit together this morning. In silence, in your miraculous light. Earth of owl's wisdom, hold us in your breath. Cradle us with gentle wind. Earth in all your glorious manifestations, in the ermine, the cardinal and the barred owl, in oak leaves still clinging, in asparagus roots itching to burst forth. Be with us in our breathing, in our listening, in our prayers of gratitude and hope. Amen. Sister, brother, take your time, go slowly. Listen deep within yourself. Simple things are more. Finding courage. Well, the first problem is that courage isn't something that can be found. It is not a piece of clothing you put on. It's not a noun. It's a way of being in which you find yourself. It comes from the heart, the Latin word cur. It comes from the heart, but the heart is beating. One day when you are 1 year old or so, you take your first step. A few years later, you are flying down the street on your bike. It's the fall of 10th grade and you don't want another year in the group you fell into last year, the cool group, which has been boring you to tears. You were in the cafeteria and it's a Thursday and you come out of the line with your tray of food and walk in the opposite direction everyone expects you to walk. And you walk up to a table of girls you know but not well, a group that are all taking AP history. And you ask if you can sit down with them. Your life changes forever. It wasn't a decision. It just was something that had to happen. And I'm going to step aside and say, and to this day, those 3 girls, we are still best of friends and we Zoom every other month. One of the great gifts of COVID. You are married to an abusive, evil man, king of the land. He refuses to help a band of men in need who know, and you know, the men will attack your country and kill your family if you do nothing. Knowing you will be beaten and likely killed for doing so by your husband, you nevertheless bring them threatening men food and plead for peace. You consult no one. It was the only thing you could do. You didn't think about the past, the horrible things the king, your husband, had done to you over the years. You didn't think about the future, the horrible things the king, your husband, will do to you when he finds out. You just are in the present. And you know what you must do. Lao Tzu, quote, "If you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present." You are the Jewish wife of an ill-advised, non-Jewish king. Your name is Esther. Your uncle comes to you to tell you he has heard that the king, your husband, has been convinced by his evil advisors to kill all the Jews in the land. At the risk of your life, because no one approaches the king without being asked on pain of death, you go to him and plead with him, and you change his mind. Your people are saved. In college one day, you raise your hand in class. It just goes up, finally. It doesn't feel like a decision. It is the end of your sophomore year, and you haven't dared to participate in any of your classes. And now suddenly your hand, and you hear yourself ask a decent question. Not a perfect, brilliant question, but a solid, honest question. And you realize in that moment how much you love philosophy, how much you love asking questions, how much you love daring to speak. And you feel yourself to be yourself for the first time in your life. You run the puck down the ice knowing you're going to be slammed against the boards. You show up to a chorus tryout knowing no one. You are a young man whose country has been attacked by Russia. You sign up. You are a Russian journalist speaking out, running on camera on state television with a sign. You are a Palestinian rights worker. You are a Palestinian daring to simply survive, resisting giving up. You are an ignored housewife suddenly feeling attractive, suddenly remembering you are that person you always were. Despite your fears of asking for help, not bearing to hear the word no, not bearing to be ignored, you suddenly pick up the phone and say, "I need help." You who has never marched for anything, find yourself taking to the streets, screaming, pleading with this country of ours, Black Lives Matter. You are a young Iranian woman in the streets. You are an old Iranian woman in the streets. You are invited to lead a march in Memphis. The sanitation workers need your support. You know well the heightened risk, especially since your sermon at Riverside coming out against the Vietnam War, and you go to Memphis anyway. It isn't a choice. And what you knew would happen, happens. You are a Nazi guard in a work camp for Jewish girls. It's 1942. Two of the girls on this particular day are too ill to go to work. They can barely sit up. And so you let them stay in their beds. But then you find out that a director is coming who will send anyone too ill to work. He will send them off to Auschwitz to be gassed. You race back to the dormitory, insist the girls get dressed and go to work. You practically drag them to stand in front of their machines, but they're too weak to even start the machines. So you do it for them, backing off just in time to allow the director to pass by as if all were fine. You know you'll be shot on the spot if you were discovered. This is the only one of many things you do to protect your girls. You didn't choose to be Aryan in Germany in 1933. You cannot refuse your job, but you act consistent with who you are. You sneak bread, you arrange meetings, you let the girls write and perform a theater piece to break the deadly pain of starvation and heavy work. A theater piece, a work of imagination that saved lives. Franklin Roosevelt, courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear. You are a farmer on the edge of a wood. You have been told you'll be rewarded if you turn in any information about any Jews left in the area, and that you will be shot if you know something and don't report it. When a bedraggled, half-naked, starving man begs at your window, you shoo him away. You are terrified. And later that night, and nights afterward, you bring out milk and bread to the forest, food you cannot spare. Thornton Wilder. Faith is an ever-widening pool of clarity, fed from springs beyond the margin of consciousness. We all know more than we know we know. You are a Russian baker in a small village in Poland. Your employee, Simcha, is Jewish. The Germans have rounded up most of the Jews in the village and are doing one final sweep when they come into the store. Simcha hides behind the oven. And you say, "No Jews here." You say it confidently and clearly in response to the Germans. And when they leave, you hustle Simcha up into the attic and then turn the ovens on at full blast to make it so hot that no one would come inside the shop again. Knowing this is only temporary, that later that night you help him get to the woods to connect him to a resistance group. You have seen yesterday you saw another shopkeeper in town shot in the street for hiding a Jew. You are terrified. That is the feeling, terror. But the action is definitive and immediate. Simcha survives. His daughter will become a researcher in Holocaust studies in the United States. The baker in this story cannot control the outcome. If he thinks of the past, he freezes. If he predicts the future, he would predict his own death. But he stays in the present. He acts decisively, convincingly. Brené Brown, courage is impossible without vulnerability. Vulnerability is showing up when you can't control the outcome. You're a professor of theology at the University of Frankfurt, Germany, in 1933. One of the first acts of Hitler's taking power was to bar all Jewish professors from the universities in Germany. You have been preaching about freedom and against the Nazi ideology. You are the first non-Jewish academician to be barred from teaching, and you must leave the country. You then work with the BBC in broadcasting over 100 radio programs beamed into Germany, trying to convince the citizens of your beloved country to see the horrors of the Nazi Party. You write a book called The Courage to Be in 1952. Abstract though it is, struggles of your previous 20 years permeate your thoughts, your life work. How did my country go so mad so quickly? Who, what, where is God? Talking recently to a friend of mine about how we can take control of our behavior, how we can be better humans, you know, one of those conversations. She said she finds that when she remembers to stop trying to control and to surrender to her higher power, she finds herself free to make the better choice. Higher power, God, universe, reality, the unwinding of fate, one's better self, whatever words you choose. She finds that when she remembers to stop trying to control and to instead surrender, she finds herself free. Surrender to a power leads to freedom. How's that? Here's the paradox again and again and again. Vulnerability, humility. This situation is beyond me. I surrender. I have to let someone, something else take over. This is an idea that Unitarian Universalists have a great deal of trouble with. I'll tell you a personal story. Years ago, when my kids were little, I was a single parent, and it was Saturday. I had a sermon for the next day. I had nothing. And I'd hired a babysitter for 4 hours. That's all I had. I had 4 hours to create a sermon out of nothing. And I went out to my writing shed, which I call the shed, my little studio, the exact dimensions of Thoreau's cabin, by the way, 10 by 16. And I sat down on my computer and I put my hands on the keys and I said, I got nothing. Somebody else is going to have to write this sermon. And I stepped aside and I started typing. And I've been writing like that ever since. And a lot of writers will tell you that's how they write. They step aside and become a channel. And I don't believe in, I don't know where I would go with that word, except in this moment. It made sense to me. I became a channel. And when we look at the other stories that I've shared this morning, at people who risked their lives again and again on a daily basis for years in some, to what did they surrender is my question. I think they surrendered to the present. And maybe that's another word for God or the universe or the earth, or they surrendered to the present, to self-identity. And there's another paradox. They surrendered to self-identity at the same time they stepped out of themselves, out of their past and future self. They surrendered to moral rules, perhaps, to God, to their higher power, which in many cases was, quote, doing the right thing. The interviews with the rescuers, again and again and again. They wonder why they're being interviewed. They did nothing heroic. It was just what anyone would do. And of course, we know almost nobody did. The rescuers are very tiny, tiny minority. They were just, they say, being themselves. Being a channel to a deeper level of our psyche, which we cannot access when we are trying to be in control. But by stepping aside, by relaxing into the present, by getting out of the way, something steps forward. The present steps forward. Thornton Wilder again. Faith is an ever-widening pool of clarity, fed from springs beyond the margin of consciousness. We all know more than we know we know. Surrender in all of these accounts is how we overcome anxiety and fear. If we admit that we aren't in charge, if we admit we are helpless, if we give into the present and its obvious course of action, then fear disappears. If you are not in the past or the future, fear disappears. Well, of course it doesn't disappear, but something greater takes over, something more important than fear. You just are who you are. I'm a writer. I am someone who cannot say no to someone starving. However, I have been brainwashed into thinking they are not human and they have caused the war. I will get them off my property as soon as possible, lest my neighbor turn me in, but I will bring them food out in the night. Nothing heroic here. It's what one does. I am just being. And as Tillich makes clear in his book, The Courage to Be, it takes so much courage just to live, just to be whoever we are. When the day comes, and of course it is already here, when the asylum seeker knocks on our door, when a fellow being, human or non-human, lies starving and emaciated at our feet, when a grieving friend needs to talk, when the earth cries out, the dead birds accumulate, the plastic washes up on our shore, we need to know who we are in the present. We need to not worry about who we will be in the future, which we cannot know in any case. We need to be present as who we are so our action, our listening, our response is authentic. I'll give you another example from my life, which was the Freedom to Marry Task Force calling me in 1999 and saying they wanted to come to my church, the Norwich Church, UCUV, to speak about gay marriage. And I said, what? We want to talk about gay marriage. It's a task force to try to get gay marriage in Vermont. I said, are you crazy? I literally said this to her. I said, you must be crazy. We aren't at A and you're asking for Z. And we talked for a while. I said, well, yeah, sure, you can come along. Now, I was gay at the time and I was out, but not out. And I had two little children in grade school, and Lori and I were partners by then. Anyway, they came and they spoke, and then things started happening in Montpelier. And I was a little nervous being gay about doing a lot of leading a lot of congregational activity, because I would be labeled as, oh, it's just her thing. And Anyway, I didn't have to worry about it because there was this groundswell from the congregation. And they formed a task force. There were about like 14 people, I think, as I remember. Incredible, completely devoted to figuring out that they felt called. The moment had come, the person had shown up, the issue had shown up on their doorstep and knocked on the door, and they answered. And we ended up having, along with this church and all the UU churches in Vermont, a huge press conference. There were 60 of us in attendance. And I'm proud to say that one other thing on this is that when they had the hearings in Montpelier, I'm sure some of you were there, actually, the Judiciary Committee hearing, and people came pro and con, and there were so many people that showed up, the place was packed, the State House was packed. And there were so many people that they ended up giving a lottery, and then they had pro people speak, one pro person, one con person, back and forth, back and forth. All the anti people were wearing these white ribbons, I remember. And brother, speaking against brother, it's just an incredible day. Well, the first person called a few days before, I suppose I had been spending weeks on my written testimony that I was going to deliver. And night before, I said, Laura, have you written something? No, that's your job. And I said, well, I think it would be, anyway, I encouraged her to write something. Well, she wrote something. And lo and behold, she's the first called in the lottery. And she's the picture the AP takes and it goes worldwide. We came out that day, needless to say, totally. But her testimony was been quoted now in books. The Rutland guy, what's his name? The Pulitzer Prize winning Rutland journalist who wrote a book about David Mote. Yeah, David Mote. The point of the story is the congregation stepped up without hesitation, without thinking, without discussion. It was like, this is our issue. This is our time. History has come to our doorstep. So not all of us can do all of it. The knocks on our doors are multiple, and often we have to choose. I have a friend who's an expert on Palestinian rights issues. I can't take that on. I support where I can. I can't take it on, etc. We all have our places. Even the most generous of rescuers in the Holocaust had to limit what they could do, lest they be caught, lest they have not enough food to feed those who they were already hiding. We must know who we are and what we are capable of, and to what extent our empathy and compassion is best aimed. Or we need simply to have practiced staying in the present. Tillich again, quote, "The courage to be is the courage to accept oneself in spite of being unacceptable." More Tillich. "The courage to be is rooted in the God who appears when God has disappeared in the anxiety of doubt." I don't understand this quote, so I'm going to keep reading it. The courage, maybe some of you can unpack this for me in the discussion. "The courage to be is rooted in the God who appears when God has disappeared in the anxiety of doubt." And then this paradox again, self-affirmation is the paradox of, quote, participation in something which transcends the self. So you're out in the field tending your sheep. You've been there for 40 years, you've married, you're happy, you've settled down. And one day, suddenly you remember your past. You see a bush burning. And you hear a voice saying, "You must return to your people." You argue and you resist and you plead, but you go. And you speak even unto Pharaoh himself, who has enslaved your people and who wants to kill you. And you lead your people out of slavery into hope. You are a famous playwright, perhaps the best playwright alive today. You are English. You've lived in England for almost your entire life. You are 50 years old when a cousin comes to visit you to tell you about your grandparents, all of whom were Jewish, all lost in the Holocaust. You didn't know. You're stunned. You research. And then one day at age 82, you write a new play, a play about your family tree, about your denial. It's called Leopoldstadt. And I brought a copy of it. You write your grief into the last act and you take the play all over America, showing your work, your life for anyone to criticize or taunt. Who you are is revealed. When who you are is revealed by a burning bush or a cousin or a moment of desperation against a deadline, your path is clear and decisive. The courage to be, quote, is rooted in the God who appears when God has disappeared in the anxiety of doubt. Self-affirmation is the paradox of participating in something which transcends the self. Courage requires an intense self-understanding, and the paradox of that is precisely this, that to be centered in self, one must transcend it. One must see it as the illusion it is, and so be able to do what is more important than fear. When the day comes, and of course it is here already, when a grieving friend needs to talk, when the earth cries out, we need to know who we are, which means we need to be participating in what transcends ourselves. We need to know this for others and for ourselves, so that when our time comes, when the back door opens, we will, head held high and with a last few humorous lines or two, as my parents gave us, and remember the film, It's a Beautiful Life. When that back door opens, we'll be able to put on our slippers, wave with a smile, and stride out. Amen. Our closing hymn is 311, Let It Be a Dance We Do. And Julaine, challenging your courage, has passed out percussion instruments, and you're free to dance around the sanctuary, I believe. Yes. I'm not courageous enough to do that, mind you, so don't get any ideas.
Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too.
Let it be a dance.
Let the dancing song be heard. Let the music say the word and fill the sky with sailing birds. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. When we all learn to be, feel the rhythm, to reap the harvest of the sea. Let it be a dance, everybody turn. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Share the laughter, and round we go again. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance with you. May I have a dance with you. Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance.
May our gratitude ever lead us. May our tiny spark of goodness ever nurture us. May the courage of this gathering be with us. May the transcendence in which we find ourselves be ever nearer. For now, and forevermore. Amen.